This video is sponsored by Dragon Shield, your destination for the best sleeves, deck boxes, and accessories in the multiverse. Purchases through the affiliate link below help the channel grow and improve. Alara once was whole, but long ago the sundering shattered the plane into 5 shards that drifted just beyond each other's reach. As the shards migrated, they slowly took on new shape, new life, new order. Mana ley lines were severed, denying each shard access to 2 colors of mana, which allowed those remaining to surge unfettered. One such shard lost its connection to white mana. Order dissolved, unity forgotten, benevolence faded. It lost the depth of thought, the cold intellect and acumen of blue mana also, which worked to mold the shard into a primordial and dangerous world, where lava flows scorch trails through stifling humid jungles, and bottomless tar pits drag the unsuspecting to dark depths. It's a shard of heat and hunger, of instinct and dominance ruled only by the laws of nature, where dragons soar and predators lurk. This is the Shard of Jund. Jund is defined by its savagery. It's a world where everything, even the very land, is hostile, and the creatures that dwell within are at all times predator and prey. The Shard of Jund is shaped primarily through its strong connection to red mana. Unfiltered passion, raw violence, and fierce fire are further heightened by support from green and black mana. These powers intertwine to devastating effect, played out across its landscape. Rugged mountain peaks extend rocky hands ever skyward, while active volcanoes constantly belch sulfurous ash and lava eats away at the earth to form deep valleys. This is displayed in the planar card of Jund. Within these, rivers choked with algae support steaming jungle canopies. Primal forests are dotted haphazardly with toxic swamps that lie stagnant. These vistas are constantly shifting, constantly being shaped by the impetus of deadly renewal deep within the shard. But Jund is defined as easily by what it lacks. Order, restraint, forethought, control, all vestiges of blue and white mana that have long since faded from the shard's memory. Without these higher ideals, Jund is reduced to primal urges. It's at the whim of instinct. Its creatures, unable to develop beyond cultural and intellectual infancy. Nature and survival reign. But by the same token, a shard without these colors is refreshingly free. Jund isn't chained to compassion, it's not a prisoner to the mind. Its creatures liberated from oppression and conformity. A sentiment typified by Sarkhan Vol, who in the flavor text of Hellkite Overlord states, "The dragon has no pretense of compassion, no false mask of civilization, just hunger, heat, and need." The beings that claim Jund as their own reflect the hostile topography. They've adapted well to their environs out of necessity. Fiery as the volcanic mountains, strong as the forest boughs, deadly as the fetid swamps, Jund's creatures are aggressively lethal. From the largest dragon to the smallest insect, all are deadly, as the flavor text of Toxic Iguana reads. There are no weak creatures on Jund. Even the smallest can strike a deadly blow. Though Jund has no leaders or kings, it is ruled quite strictly through the laws of nature. Those who deviate don't survive. An elaborate food chain, a primal pecking order grants structure to Jund's ecosystem. To fully understand the shard, we must scrutinize and appreciate the beasts found at each level, beginning at the top with the insatiable Hellkites and unstoppable dragons of Jund. As a marquee creature of red mana, it's little wonder that dragons have flourished along the ley lines suffusing Jund. With wings that span dozens of meters, bodies covered in thick scales, piercing teeth the size of humans, and breath of liquefying fire, dragons are the apex predators. They embody raw strength and the will to use it. All other creatures fear the dragon, and only another of its kind can rival its destructive potential. Jund's dragons are territorial and vicious. They lay claim to land with molten fire, carving out large swaths over which they hunt and rule. Once taken, a dragon will only relinquish its lands through death. The card Flameblast Dragon illustrates the beauty and destruction of these miraculous creatures. Its flavor text reading, "He marks his territory with fire and wrath, etching the mountainside with his charring breath." All beings fear the dragon, but born from this fear, or perhaps an appreciation for the marriage of strength and passion, is a cult-like following of devotees. worshippers wishing to spare their lives through supplication or to receive divine gifts from their overlords. The goblin clans of Jund worship dragons from high atop mountain peaks in hopes of basking in draconic freedom, which we can see in cards like Dragon Appeasement and Dragon's Herald. But the grace of a dragon is fickle at best, non-existent at worst. Their contempt even for the devoted is on display in an illustration of Predator Dragon, whose flavor text reads, "Dragons make for spiteful gods." Dragons build their roosts on the highest summits and within burning volcanoes. From the vaulted heights they survey their hunting grounds with dedicated vigilance. There's little treasure on Jund to hoard, but dragons seek the mystical crystals known as sangrite for its luster and magical potential for much devastation. Intrepid human hunting parties brave draconic lairs to abscond with this rare crystal. When a dragon approaches its final days following a long, brutish and violent life, it performs one last act of destruction through a ritual known as the Shriek of Flame. They willingly plunge themselves into the boiling lava of an active volcano, merging their essence with that of the fire and stoking a white-hot blast of energy that consumes not just the dragon, but all within a large radius. This suicidal and spiteful act of mutual destruction renders a dragon's valued hunting grounds denuded of game and ensures no rival will claim it. This act is showcased in the card Volcanic Submersion. Its text reads, "A dragon's death is almost as feared as its life. Old, dying dragons throw themselves into volcanoes, causing massive upheaval and widespread disaster." Many believe all eruptions to be propagated by a dragon's death. Though Jund is a wild land free from thought, there are several sentient races populating its jungles. The humanoid reptilian Viashino are one such race, and sit below the dragon on the food chain, their form reminiscent of those soaring creatures. Viashino are tall, well-muscled, and dangerously aggressive. Though their razor-sharp talons can fillet flesh and their jaws crush steel, many Viashino fight with crude spears and cudgels used to bludgeon foes. We see this illustrated in Viashino's Slaughtermaster as it wields two weapons adeptly, the flavor text of which highlights their disposition. "I'll fight two at once and then lick their guts from my blades." Viashino are communal pack creatures. They organize themselves into clans known as thrashes to improve hunting ability and ensure higher rates of survival in inhospitable environments. As the flavor text of Thunder Thrash Elder states, Viashino are led by elders and veterans of many battles, their acumen and experiential knowledge used to guide clans. Viashino range within the fertile vegetated canyons of Jund, where a dragon's wings can't spread and their fire can't reach. Lizards called iguanars accompany Viashino on hunting sorties to track and trap prey, which we can see in the card Hissing Iguanar. Notable thrashes include the aforementioned Thunder Thrash, the violent warriors of the Thorn Thrash, and the fiery shamans of the Scorched Thrash. Just as territorial as dragons, Jund's Viashino constantly raid another's borders, test leadership, and challenge another in bloody war to assert dominance. Below the Viashino thrashes sit the sentient race of human barbarians and shamans that sojourn across Jund's topography. Denied the assurance of such base needs as shelter, food, safety, Jund's human population spends all waking hours focused on mere survival, which has stunted both intellectual and technological advancement. Here, humans are simple and barbaric, ruled by primal instinct, shaped by superstition. They form nomadic bands of warriors tied by familial blood bonds. Constantly mobile in search of quarry and shelter, humans often trek long distances, which brings them into conflict with another, as well as Jund's dangerous creatures. Strong leadership is a necessity, and only the most ruthless, battle-hardened warriors are deemed fit enough to lead barbarian clans. Humans actively seek adversity, engaging in war to hone skill and slake thirst for blood. Entire clans endeavor on great hunting treks called life hunts to fell Jund's largest predators. Not even dragons are above human bloodlust, and though they are respected, they are equally hunted, which we hear in the flavor text of Rip Clan Crasher. If you breathe, she will fight you. If you breathe fire, she must fight you. Jund warriors are bolstered by the stirring fire and lightning magic of its shamans. Their powerful incantations are used to incite zealous bloodlust before battle, and to direct the primordial forces of nature abundant across the shard. By drawing on the ley lines, human shamans can invigorate growth, spread biting pestilence, hurl balls of fire and electricity, and bring forth elementals, manifestations of dangerous power. We see the potential for destruction on display in the illustration of Branching Bolt, and in the ability of Rakamar, Jun's most prodigious shaman, to generate elementals. Her words extolling the skills of shamans are given in the flavor text of the aforementioned Bolt. Lightning lives in everything, in living flesh and growing things. It must be set free. Jun's barbaric humans are divided into various clans and subfactions that wage constant war on another and their environment to maintain precious food and water supplies. As mentioned earlier, members of the Rip clan are audacious and seek challenge everywhere, summarized in the flavor text of Blister Beetle. Warriors of the Rip clan wear their beetle acid scars proudly, even modifying clothing and armor to better display the trophy. Perhaps the most notorious is Clan Neltoth, whose shamans embrace potent death magic, animating corpses such as the zombie dragon Scourge of Neltoth. Their power on display in Morbid Bloom and the ability of Marin of Clan Neltoth. Scavenging and scurrying at the bottom of Jun's chain are various small lizards, fungal plants, crocodiles, drakes, and innumerable expendable goblin tribes. Jun's goblins live deep within mountain caverns and atop jagged peaks, where they can maintain close proximity to their winged gods, the dragons. Goblin society is structured around their deities, whom they worship and to whom they provide a steady stream of food through ritual sacrifice. Goblins often sacrifice dozens to appease the dragons and gain strength from their gifts. In fact, a noble death in ritual to feed their overlords is something cherished by most goblins. We see this in cards like Dragon's Herald and Dragon Fodder, whose flavor text reads, "Goblins journey to the sacrificial peaks in pairs, so that the rare survivor might be able to relate the details of the other's grisly demise." Jun's goblins are aggressive, unpredictable, reckless, and impetuous. They have no concern for their own well-being, no thought for the past or future. They embrace the liberating passion of the present. Ignorant of their own plight, they hunt and give battle to all manner of foe, regardless of size or strength. This sentiment is beautifully encapsulated in the flavor text of Goblin Death Raiders. Every once in a while, when they aren't getting incinerated in lava, crushed under rock slides, or devoured by dragons, goblins experience moments of unmitigated glory in battle. For a race that sees sacrifice as the highest honor and where death brings glory, it's exceedingly difficult to find a goblin that has passed of old age. There are myriad creatures that fill niches within Jun's elaborate and deadly ecosystems. Other notable creatures lurking within the steaming jungles include a race of large lizards unique to the shard called Thrynax. These beasts are highly adaptable and vicious. Some grow stronger with each kill, as we see in Scarland Thrynax and Bloodspore Thrynax. They scavenge what they can and prey on the weak. Others, such as the Sprouting Thrynax, are best fit for prey themselves, heard in the flavor text. The vast network of predation on Jund has actually caused some strange creatures to adapt to being eaten. Jund is also host to a wide variety of elementals spawned from its surging mana and instilled with the violent temperament of the landscape. As we have discussed, some are birthed of shamanic magic and directed in their devastation by powerful mages, but many more are pure expressions of Jund's explosive nature. We see their fire in the illustration of Bloodpyre Elemental, whose flavor text reads, "Elementals born of Jund are as cruel and unstable as the plane itself," while the Rockslide Elemental embodies the deadly mountain peaks in their sturdy but unpredictable demeanor. Others, like the Tar Fiend and Massive Lord of Extinction, draw their power from pestilence, death, and the bottomless bogs found deep below Jund's canopy. A uniting concept on the Shard of Jund is resilience in death, strength in consumption. It's only natural in a world shaped by hunger and need that some evolve towards expendability, towards the fate of prey, while others grow towards premier predation. Two mechanics marry this concept and creatures beautifully. The first is an abundance of fodder. Many creatures on Jund are not only prepared for death, but use it as a means of propagation. We've seen this in the aforementioned Sprouting Thrynax, but other species, the likes of the Tukatung Thalid and Mitotic Slime, also generate creature tokens when they die, ensuring continuation of their species. The second is the hunger of the predator manifest in Jund's Devour mechanic. This is the insatiable drive, the base instinct and unadulterated violence of the shard, where everything is prey to something and only the strong survive. These creatures flourish with each kill, and many, like the Hellkite hatchling and Mycoloth, grant new or powerful abilities once placated. Dragons, Viashino, Hellions, worms, the apex predators all support this mechanic, which is fueled by the plentiful prey skittering about. With the conflux of Alara, shards have come crashing into another and merged once more to form a single plane. This has led to explosive, creative, violent interactions between worlds that have evolved in isolation and bereft of two colors of mana. On Jund, white and blue mana surge, bringing intelligence and order to the wildlands. Cards like Skyclan Thrash, Gloryscale Viashino, and Mycoid Shepherd highlight Jund's ability to adapt and the willingness of its denizens to be shaped by mana foreign to them. The extent to which this reforms Jund as a whole is summarized in the Shepherd's flavor text. As pure mana flooded across the shards, it brought a sense of unity even to Jund's vicious food chain. But just as its creatures bring unity and thought to Jund's landscape, so too do they export its raw passion and reputation for brutal violence to the other shards. The elves of Naya embrace Jund's deadly ecosystems and revere as gods the dragons soaring across the skies, seen in cards like God Tracker of Jund and Bloodbraid Elf. Bant's knights, bound by duty, honor, and order, are ill-prepared for the bellicose chaos of Jund's predators, which we see in the illustration of Giant Ambush Beetle, where a massive insect hunts unwitting knights, and in the flavor text of Jund Hackblade, which reads, "The knights were halfway through their pre-combat rites before they realized the foul brute meant to start without them." Jund, a savage land replete with dangers and pulsing with raw emotion, a primeval landscape shaped by molten lava, surging with uncompromising growth and violence. Its creatures bear strong vitality, themselves transformed into ferocious and insatiable predators, mirrored by their environs. It's a shard of freedom, of beauty, of bloodshed. With the conflux of Alara, Jund must question its foundational ideals as its landscape and creatures are rocked by a tumultuous influx of novel mana and reforming ideas. Ever adaptable, its dragons and beasts may find new grounds over which to range. Its primitive tribes may embrace thoughts of civilization. One point remains certain: Jund will retain its fiery chaos, for which it is known. Alara once was whole, but long ago the Sundering shattered the plane into 5 shards that drifted just beyond each other's reach. As the shards migrated, they slowly took in new shape, new life, new order. Mana ley lines were severed, denying each shard access to 2 colors of mana, which allowed those remaining to surge unfettered. One such shard lost its connection to blue mana. Prognostication lost its value. Higher thought drifted. The cold calculus of investigation melted. Black mana was likewise severed. Ambition forgotten. Death no longer claimed dominion over life. Pestilence abated. In this environment, life flourished and nature exploded across the shard. Massive rainforests, thick with fog and impenetrable, cover the land. Their heavy boughs and sturdy roots constantly extend sylvan fingers toward the sun and encroach precious few open plains. Mountains struggle with the canopy to reach into the clouds. Here, where nature is vigorous, the creatures are equally so. They grow to unimaginable proportions, their footfalls reminiscent of rolling thunder and disastrous earthquakes. They are feared and revered by the races that cower in their awesome shadow. This is the Shard of Naya. Naya is a world characteristic of unbridled natural growth, a realm unbound by crippling self-consciousness or disease, which has allowed flora and fauna to explode. Naya is primarily aligned with green mana. It draws on surging ley lines to flourish and promotes embrace of wild ideals. Strength rules Naya. Nature is revered, and its primal might manifests in massive behemoths that stalk through jungles large enough to hide towering frames. We see this illustrated beautifully in the Naya Plains Chase card, as well as the card Lush Growth, which depicts the steaming jungles. Its flavor text reads, "Naya's bounty spills over upon itself. Each leaf and flower struggles against the next with thrashing thorns, acidic pollen, and strangling roots." The blossoming growth of green mana is tempered by white mana, which adds direction, structure, and supports further expansion of reverent life. Silence reigns in the idyllic plains and rolling fields suffused with white mana ley lines where herd beasts range and birds soar above through cloudless skies. White grants organization to tame raw growth. Naya's cultures have formed tight-knit societies. Its jungle and mountain ecosystems represent structured hierarchies where every creature fills a vital niche. Chaotic, destructive forces of red mana are, however, equally embraced. Jagged mountain peaks and steamed hot springs add elements of passion, of aggression and creativity characteristic of red to the Nayan landscape. Nature grows erratic and throws the yoke of civilization. Its beasts burn with bellicose animosity. Its people embody passionate freedom. The amalgamation of these colors results in a brilliant canvas painted by light and growth, where nature in all its aspects are revered and where dark forces gain little purchase. It's a picturesque scene, the pinnacle of harmony in nature. If one word encapsulates the sentiment of Naya, it is immense. Fueled by surges of mana, nothing little grows. Everything is on a shockingly grand scale. Chief examples are the tropical rainforests that cover large swaths of the Nayan horizon. The trees found within extend hundreds of feet skyward, their boughs and branches large enough to support entire communities. So densely packed are these jungles that precious few shards of light filter through the leaf-choked canopies to reach undergrowth. Where they strike, seedlings burst feverishly to stake claim to the sun's nourishment. Lush valleys with rushing rivers create vibrant vistas. Beyond lie rugged mountain ranges home to all manner of beast. A dense fog blankets large tracts of both forest and mountain, coating the landscape in opaque mists. This permanent fog, called the white cover, reduces visibility such that massive behemoths can go completely unnoticed, as is the case with Earl the Miststalker. Several beasts such as the bull Ceradon use the white cover as camouflage to hide movement and more easily hunt prey. Its flavor text reads, "It holds motionless vigil, watching Naya in silence through the screen of the white cover. When it senses anything amiss, it launches forward with the uncanny sound of torn fog." There are myriad creatures, both sentient and less so, that inhabit Naya's vibrant panorama, but from the variegated species that call the shard home, none encapsulate immensity and unbound growth more so than the godlike behemoths in whose wake forests are felled, fields are plowed, and the very earth gives way. Behemoths are Naya's primal forces made manifest. They embody the restless vigor of life, its destructive potential, as well as its bounteous bloom. Behemoths occupy the highest positions in the natural ecosystem. They fight another over hunting grounds and territorial superiority. They hunt lesser prey, and they send all manner of creatures bolting towards safety of underbrush. Beasts like the horned Ceradon run rampant through forest floor and expansive field. Even their young, like the yearling, are formidable forces of nature. Others, like the species of Thokdar, are highly territorial and aggressive, which we hear in the flavor text of Woolly Thokdar. One of the most ferocious and deadly gargantuans, the Thokdar never sees its worshippers, but it often awakens surrounded by gifts and sacrifices. Naya's behemoths are variable in size, shape, temperament, and character, but a unifying feature categorizes them as gargantua, is a base power of 5 or greater. This is reflected in the activated and triggered abilities of several Nayan cards concerned with creatures of such immense power. Behemoths are central figures in Nayan culture, where many races worship them as gods and hunt alongside their impressive stature. The sheer enormity and power possessed by behemoths is most adeptly conveyed in the flavor text of Rakeclaw Gargantuan, which states, "Naya teems with gargantuans, titanic monsters to whom both nature and civilization defer." And in Cliffrunner Behemoth, it's revered for its power, celebrated for its grace, and feared for the avalanches triggered by its thunderous feet. Though behemoths represent the pinnacle of natural selection, they're by no means the only creatures to be feared. Amid the dense jungle foliage, massive spiders weave traps of silk and wait in silence for unsuspecting prey. They're on display in the Jungle and Emberweaver, whose text tells of the notorious webbed hunting grounds. Weaver's webs wall off swaths of territory more effectively than any portcullis made of iron. Hellion and Hydra surge through forest floor, cutting paths of fiery destruction across the jungle interior. Even species considered small pests are deceptively formidable. Dozens of ant, bug, and insect species scurry across the underbrush, standing nearly as tall as a human and strong enough to kill several. Against such unfettered growth and destruction, the sentient races of Naya must remain vigilant. But despite its dangers, the shard is home to several humanoid, civilized cultures that benefit from unity and the strength to defend themselves found in numbers. The first, and perhaps most susceptible, are bands of human warriors and shamans that dwell largely on the dangerous forest floor. Humans are survivors. They've adapted well to the uncertainty of jungle life and revere all aspects of nature. Though initially consigned to a lightless fate in the dark roots beneath 9 canopies, humans have carved out large fields of brilliant sunlight, cultivated golden lands, and erected stone structures which we see in cards like Ancient Ziggurat. Their sunseeders search for ripe, arable lands and use domesticated beasts of burden called plow beasts to clear forest and till the soil. This is given to us in the text of Sunseed Nurturer. Sunseeders quest for areas of open sky. They train plow beasts to beat back the dense jungle long enough to cultivate a crop. Groups of trackers known as drum hunters listen to the jungle's song, feel for the reverberations of gargantuan footfalls, then organize hunting sorties to track down prey startled into movement. The exuberants, meanwhile, bask in the warm embrace of life itself, extolling the glories of nature from jungle shrines or ziggurats. They sojourn across Naya to contemplate the shard's beautiful landscape and to locate resplendent dwellings. Some, like the Gust Rider exuberant, seek to claim the skies which we can hear in its flavor text. The elves claim the canopy, the Nakado claim the mountains. I suppose you think we ought to stay on the jungle floor? Above the rough and dangerous floor life of humans, Naya's elves have secured dwellings within the vast network of jungle boughs and canopies. Entire elvish cities are supported on top of Naya's massive branches, which double as superhighways, allowing an elf to travel as far as the eye can see without ever setting foot on the ground. Elves are nomadic and the most in tune with nature of the civilizations. They worship Naya's gargantuans and revere them as gods. The most widespread elf clan are the Cillian elves, whose warriors and shamans are led by the blind seer known as the Anima. The Anima speaks to the earth and listens in the indecipherable language of nature to learn the intentions of behemoths. Nyan elves busy themselves with tracking gargantua movements, divining truth from their activities, and protecting them from would-be poachers, as the flavor text of Seyselum Archer states. Our arrows are aimed not at the sacred behemoths, but at those who dare to dream of such a trophy. The god trackers and shamans offer ritual sacrifice to placate behemoths in times of peace, or stir ire in times of war. Elvish lore holds that the soul of Alara slumbers deep under the sacred valley of the Ancient in the form of an immense hydra called Progenitus. They sit in silent vigil over the valley, awaiting signs that Progenitus may awaken from its long sleep, which we see illustrated in the card Keeper of Progenitus. They believe the stirrings of the world soul will fulfill ancient prophecies with disastrous consequences. Elves are proficient warriors skilled in both short and long-range combat, supplemented by wild mages that direct the pentagression of behemoths to create a truly formidable force on the field. Beyond the lush jungles, above the opaque mists of the white cover, high amid the mountain chains, sit the cat-like race of Naya's Leonin called Nakado. In ancient times, the waxing Nakado Empire of the Clouds claimed dominion over much of the shard's landscape. Extensive highways connected technologically advanced cosmopolitan centers, and martial prowess extended borders. But after a sect of traditional fundamentalists led by Marisi, aggrieved by the Nakado's descent to complacency, fomented a bloody rebellion, the once lustrous empire crumbled. Now, most of Naya's Leonin rove in factional primitive tribes. The teachings of Marisi are heard in the flavor text of Nakado Savage, in which Ajani Goldmane states, "Blades dull and armor dense, Marisi taught us that instinct is the only thing a true warrior needs." Leonin embrace the bestial aspects of nature. Driven by instinct and burning passion, they rely on physical strength to hunt and win the day. Outfitted with tooth, claw, and primitive blades, Nakado war prides rove the land, viciously attacking unwanted interlopers. Their skill in battle is illustrated in the card Marisi's Twin Claws, which depicts two warriors atop a heap of fallen foes. Few Nacatl remain that keep to the traditions of the ancient empire. These cloud Nacatl inhabit the crumbling ruins and forlorn mountaintops, hoping to return to their race's golden age. We see them in the card Nacatl Hunt Pride. Wild Nacatl have descended into Naya's vast jungle valleys and sprawling plains, where they continue to live by Marisi's teachings. Their contempt for the Cloud Prides can be heard in scathing invective present in the flavor text of Wild Nacatl. The clouds sit and think, a bunch of soft paws. We are the claws of Marisi, stalking, pouncing, drawing blood. The Leonin Kasali tribe is perhaps the most notable, as its members include Jazal Goldmane and his planeswalking brother Ajani. The Nacatl of Naya have thrown off the lie of civilization, reverted to primal instinct, and embraced their savage nature. Their familial prides are ever at violent odds with the humans and elves of Naya. With the coming of the Conflux and merging of Alara's shards, Naya finds itself buffeted by surges of blue and black mana that have been absent for centuries. First, this brings new perspective, new ways of thinking, and new ideas that force the shards' communities to challenge long-held beliefs. Blue mana brings with it insight and greater levels of cognition. This elevates some while completely destroying others. Strength, which had for so long dominated Naya in the form of its indomitable beasts, is now attacked by the forces of the mind. Some refuse to accept the changes to the plane, such as the Knotvine mystics and elvish druids, which we can hear in the flavor text. The elves of Naya were the last to acknowledge the massive shift of mana in their world, while others, like the Leonin Nacatl, embraced change and adapted, which we see illustrated in Leonin Armor Guard, that depicts a Nacatl undergoing investiture into Bant's nightly cast. Secondly, this brings decay, pestilence, and rot as black mana leeches into all things and tarnishes the pristine wildlife. Noxious disease finds easy purchase in abundant jungles as plague spreads from the rotting shards of Grixis and Jund, which we see on display in the card Corrupted Roots. The flavor text reads, "The bones of Jund's dead resurfaced in Naya, poisoning the jungle and killing the Sunseeker's crops." So too do creatures of detritus find a wealth of food and rapidly proliferate. They quickly devour whole regions of vibrant rainforest, highlighted in the art and text of Putrid Leech, which states, "It reacted to Naya's overabundant food supply by growing additional mouths." It's into this new world of explosive convergence that Mael the Anima reluctantly leads the peoples and behemoths of Naya. Such tempestuous lashing of isolated shards brings forth flashpoints of violence and war. Supplied with the greatest natural warriors and fiercest beasts, Mael commands a Nayan army to confront encroachment by other shards and stake claim to new realms. A sentiment given to us in the flavor text of Megalanoth. When the shards merged, Mael found herself the general of Naya's mightiest army. While the card Knotvine Paladin highlights moments of cooperation as a Knight of Bant joins the Nayan behemoths. In it, Mael remarks that he's part of a new breed of guardian, one who embraces the best of both his world and ours. Naya, a shard heavily steeped in green mana, a landscape of abundant plenty where the footfalls of its massive behemoths reverberate through verdant jungles. It's a world that embraces nature, reveres simplicity, and fosters communities of growth. It's at times dangerously unpredictable, at times harmoniously organized, and always a source of beauty and awe. But much is changing. With the conflux, Naya's denizens must adapt to new landscapes, new forces of nature, must distinguish friend from foe, and must staunchly defend their lands or risk falling to the deadly machinations of other shards. A new world order rises on Alara. Will Naya change to meet its greatest challenge it has ever faced? Alara once was whole, but long ago the sundering shattered the plane into 5 shards that drifted just beyond each other's reach. As the shards migrated, they slowly took on new shape, new life, new order. Mana ley lines were severed, denying each shard access to 2 colors of mana, which allowed those remaining to surge unfettered. One such shard lost its connection to black mana. Pestilence subsided, greed and ambition faded from memory, the indefatigable march of death abated. The tethers of red mana were likewise cut as the shard floated in isolation. Fiery aggression cooled, individualism tempered, creativity, passion, and anarchy dissolved. In this environment, order dominated. Honor and duty became integral and were supplemented by intelligent adherence to law. In this world, life reigned supreme. No longer encumbered by plague or disease, the land became one of idyllic abundance, its inhabitants free from life-shortening maladies. Here, there is structure to all things. Here, thanks is given to the nourishing land. Here, nightly warriors patrol manicured highways and benevolent angels observe their flock from on high. This is the Shard of Bant. Bant's a shard of chivalric conduct and knightly honor. It's a realm that champions safety, duty, and strict adherence to moral codes for the betterment of society. Sun-bathed plains, well-maintained groves, and foaming seas, all crisscrossed by roadways and dotted with domineering castles or glistening cities, are common sights across Bant, and instill a sense of peaceful contemplation. We see this illustrated to perfection in the art of Bant's Planechase card, and hear it in the flavor text of Bant Charm, which reads, "Bant is a world where death and chaos hold no sway," while that of Bant Panorama gives us insight into the lives of its denizens and reads, "Bant's hearts are as pure as its air and as bright as its skies." Bant is primarily aligned with the color of white mana, and as such embraces many of its values. Community and selflessness are foundational pillars of society, where individual deeds are lauded, but individualism and selfishness are ostracized. Life is cherished, and many of Bant's denizens tap into the healing arts to further extend it. Order is the rock atop which all of the shard is structured. Its influence is ingrained by the caste system that rules socio-political interactions. White mana is supported in its rigid shape by blue mana ideals. The merging of these colors has given rise to communities of monks, scholars, and lawyers that meticulously craft legal doctrine in ink-stained vellum that is later codified into governing law. They busy themselves with determining how best to shape a perfect society of honor. Blue bestows foresight and intelligence, allowing Bant's cultures to develop complex civilizations fueled by advanced technologies. Blue mana's cold detachment is offset by the nourishing embrace of green mana. It supports white's inclination towards life, harmony, and unity. Aristocracy rule landed estates where countless crop fields are cultivated and tilled to support Bant's populations. Fruit orchards, sylvan groves, and golden fields of wheat cover large vistas and generate an aura of idyllic existence characteristic of the shard. This merging of colors coalesces in subconscious cultural ideals of honor and virtue, which are manifested in Bant's hallmark ability called Exalted. Those who pursue valor and distinction in battle are bolstered by those around them, armed and armored by their squires, and granted boons by angels above, highlighted in the Exalted ability to buff a creature that enters rigorous single combat. We see this in cards like Ardent Plea and Aven Squire. Bant is just as easily defined by what it lacks. Without the shadow of death black mana represents, the denizens of Bant are free to enjoy all of life's stunning splendor, and many wizards or angels possess resurrective abilities to cast off the yoke of death indefinitely. Likewise, decay and rot are scant throughout the countryside. Stained hearts, those possessed by greed or personal ambition, are few but zealously persecuted. There's little room for devious machination in this structured world. The raw emotion and aggressive urges of red mana have equally been snuffed. Bant is ruled not by emotion but by reason. Anarchy, chaos, burning ingenuity are tempered through doctrine and instillment of communal codes. This engenders a sense of peace, of equality, of mutual prosperity across the shard. A veneer of shining armor and dauntless protection coats the world, but those blinded by appearances fail to recognize a society of oppression, weighed down by statutes and laws that suppress any form of individualism or contrary thought. It, like stone, is cold, rigid, and unmoving, a sentiment offered in the flavor text of Ignite Disorder. The shaman prowled the academy halls, shaking his head at the pomp and babble of the sages inside. He knew just the spell to liven the place up. Bant is a shard bound by duty, adherent to moral codes. To To fully appreciate it, one must consult the unbending caste system that dominates society and organizes it from the lowliest serf to the sublime angel. An individual is fated to a particular caste at birth, but through perilous undertaking of noble distinguishable acts and the accumulation of prized medals known as sigils, one can break from their caste and rise through elite ranks. Sigils are possessed of powerful magic and bestowed onto the worthy by Bant's angelic host. They represent values of courage, sacrifice, honor, dauntlessness, and are on display in cards like Mark of Asylum and Sigil of the New Dawn, whose flavortext states, "The sigil represents an honor that endures beyond death." But these accolades of achievement are weighed with responsibility, which we see illustrated in Call to Heal, as a bearer is magically summoned against their will, the flavortext of which reads, "On Bant, a sigil is both a prize of honor and a bond of duty. The one who bears it may be called to fulfill that charge at any moment." The largest by number of Bant's castes makes up the lowest rung and foundation upon which their nations can flourish. Peasants, serfs, artisans, craftsmen, squires, laity of all forms constitute the mortar caste, aptly named for these toiling peoples labor ceaselessly for the betterment of society. They act as the mortar that binds the brick of their ordered society, and as the name implies, are extremely hardy. The flavortext of a cross and squire suggests that the mortar caste fill the ranks of Bant's large standing armies, eager to earn renown and sigils. It reads, "Bant's armies are primarily composed of members of the mortar caste, loyal commoners who haven't yet earned a sigil. These individuals are selfless and accept their laborious roles without spite. Individuals of the mortar caste take pride in their purpose and supply the nations of Bant with all manner of goods and services beyond mere manpower. They are indispensable, which we hear in the flavortext of Knight Captain of Eos. The strength of Bant's caste system is the unfailing loyalty of its meekest members." Those who have gathered accolades through heroism and duty are elevated to the sigiled caste. Here is where the bulk of Bant's warrior elite are ceremoniously invested as knights. Trained in the martial arts of swordplay, jousting, and mounted combat on horse-sized cats called leotau, the sigiled caste are the sword and shield of society. Lauded as chivalric heroes and possessed of self-indulgent chauvinism, knights travel the realm to protect the meek, seek glory, and resolve disputes amongst another in melee combat. Their deadly gallantry on display in the illustration of cards such as Knight of the White Orchid and Knight of the Skyward Eye. The number and significance of sigils acquired determines hierarchy within the caste, as knights incessantly compare their deeds with another. Some sigils offer boons of protective magic to the wearer, which we see in the illustration of Mirror Sigil Sergeant, whose magic creates ethereal copies of its bearer. The knights of the sigiled caste are augmented by the healers, priests, and mages of the sighted caste. Clerics tend wounded, call forth revitalizing magic, and perform incantations to stir martial passion. Monks and ministers travel the open fields of Bant, offering wisdom and respite for the soul and shepherding the misguided. The sighted are prolific in their command of magic to bolster unity and to divine far-seeing prognostications. Cards like Frontline Sage and Bant Battle Mage highlight the strategic significance of sighted wizards to craft skillful tactical plans, while cards like Rock's Meditant and Topan Ascetic demonstrate the preaching and religious zeal assumed by many members of this caste. Above the sighted sit the elite members of the Blessed class, so named due to their role as mortal intermediaries with Bant's angelic host. The Blessed are the nobles of the realm, landed aristocrats, retired or aged knights, governors, princes, castellans, and other government officials that direct the drive towards peaceful progress across the shards communities. They number the fewest and are most likely to achieve such vaulted position through blood rather than deed. Many of Bant's laity mumble indignations at their exclusive positions. Sitting above all on Bant and looking down with protective benevolence are the winged host of Bant's angels. Angels embody life, selflessness, duty, and honor. They occupy the center of Bant's religion and culture as the masses draw from angelic inspiration to perform gallant deeds and harness the willpower to endure through tribulations. As mentioned, angels confer sigils onto the worthy and protect the righteous, but otherwise remain free from public interaction, shrouding themselves in inscrutable myth. Their words passed down through blessed intermediaries. So great is their reverence towards the angels that Bantians pursue angelic reincarnation, which we hear in the flavor text of Invincible Hymn. Bantians believe those who are born into the highest caste and live a life of discipline and virtue can ascend to become angels. The angels have within their ranks their own caste system. At the top sit the Asura, 7 of the most senior angels whose guidance forms the court of orderly contemplation. Janara the Asura of War is its only known member. Below are the Amisha, who are physical manifestations of intangible ideas. They represent altruism, honor, sacrifice, and channel their magic to cast sigils imbued with power bestowed upon the worthy, as seen in Blessing of the Amisha. Little is known of the Mahra, who act as orderlies and assist the Asura and Amisha by enacting proclamations. Finally, there are the celebrants. These make up the lowliest of angels, yet they are the most visible in the mortal world. They're responsible for answering prayers, protecting their flock, and dispensing righteous judgment on unbelievers. They're battle-hardened and fierce, which we see in cards like Battle Grace Angel and Angelic Benediction, leading from the fore and marshalling Bant's formidable armies. Just as the shard is divided into hierarchy, so too is it split in geography. 5 nations lay claim to various regions of the landscape, and although foundational beliefs unite cultures, varying degrees of nationalism and self-righteousness spark conflicts between them as border zones are hotly contested. Bant's interior swath of rolling hills and golden grasslands is populated by 3 independent states. Known as the Inner Three, these are the nations of Akrasa, Eos, and Topa. Lustrous palisades and tall watchtowers line the border of Akrasa City, whose stalwart defenders are adorned with heavy plate mail, as is illustrated in Guardians of Akrasa. The flavor text of Kiss of the Amisha highlights the significance of jousting tournaments where knights from across the realm converge in this great nation. The fields of Eos are patrolled by renowned rangers attuned with nature to better survey the landscape. Adept falconers, they dispatch birds of prey on scouting missions, while they themselves trek miles of open plain atop fleet-footed Leotaus. We see this skill on display in Ranger Captain of Eos and Ranger of Eos, whose flavor text reads, "At his side, humble beasts become weapons more deadly than sharpened steel." Desolate scrubland extends in all directions across the Topa region. Its isolation marks it as a favorite banishment site for exiles and malcontents, as given to us in the text of Excommunicate. Our law prohibits capital punishment. We believe even the greatest offenders have the chance to redeem themselves. While the illustration of Topan ascetic evokes the sense of lonely wandering common in the endless grasses. Steep cliffs, battered by salty winds and crashing waves, mark the territory of the Valeron coastline. This proud nation is ruled by 12 noble families whose seat of power rests in the tranquil grove of the sun-dappled court. Knight stewards in golden armor and keen-eyed archers guard the court from attack, while leaders deliberate, seen in cards like Court Archers and Steward of Valeron. This coastal province is engaged in interminable conflict with the island nation of Jess across the waves. Valeron constantly pressures subjugation, but is often thwarted by Jessian subterfuge. This island nation is proud and independent, a haven for exiles, rogues, and other disaffected parties wishing to escape oppression from the other nations. Jess employs several spies and assassins to secure its borders, seen in cards like Jessian Thief and Lookout, while the flavor text of Outrider of Jess regales us on its protracted rivalry with Valeron and reads, "The island nation of Jess is under constant siege from Valeron on the mainland. Riders traverse the coastline, always on the lookout for sails or aven." Despite its impressed orthodoxy, Bant sports a diverse range of creatures and races. Humans are by far the most numerous and engage at all levels of caste society, from diligent serfs to sigilled knights to sighted wizards. Aven take to cloudless skies as squires, warriors, and messengers who transport important missives between Bant elites. They value their status as those closest to the angels and often seek their blessing. The rhino folk called rocks are unique to the Shard of Bant. They embody obstinate conviction, steadfast loyalty, and brute strength harmoniously married in a form of dangerous grace. They're often employed as monks and healers, as seen in Rock's Meditant and Rock's Warmonk, whose flavor text grants insight into their disposition. Rock's monks are dedicated to spiritual growth and learning, and most bear the sigils of many students. However, they do not gladly suffer fools or those who disagree with their carefully wrought dogma. They are also formidable warriors who dauntlessly charge into the frenzy of battle, illustrated in Rock's Bodyguard, whose flavor text states, "An enlightened soul, caged in a body made for battle." With the coming of the Conflux, Bant finds itself assaulted by foreign shards bearing dangerous and unknown surges of red and black mana. Chaos, individuality, and aggression threaten to shatter the cold sanctity of Bant society, as those who embrace red mana question the foundational caste system thrust upon them. We see this illustrated in cards like Rock's Brute and Glory of Warfare. Death, ambition, and greed likewise are brought to Bant's shores in the form of black mana. Initially, new ideas, new emotions, and new magic strike an imbalance at Bant's structures as individuals convert to new perspectives, as seen in the Ethercast Knight and Knotvine Paladin. But external threats unite the nations of Bant, who stand resolute and undaunted in the face of new foes. This is illustrated in the art of Martial Coup, which sees knights sally forth to face Naya's behemoths and reads, "Their war forgotten, the nations of Bant stood united in the face of a common threat." The sigiled warriors and angels of Bant must vehemently oppose the zombie hordes of Grixis and the draconic beasts of Jund, for they represent both red and black mana. Such creatures and ideas are fervently persecuted with utmost derision. Bant, a noble and idyllic realm where the knightly virtues of honor, duty, and sacrifice are pursued by the enlightened hearts that dwell within, where country estates and verdant groves foster growth, where wisdom and doctrine bestow regulated purpose, where armored heroes defend the meek and angels cast resplendent light. It's a land much to be admired, but one burdened by strictures, shackled to antiquated systems, and suppressive of nonconformity. With the Conflux, Bant's idol is shattered, and it must reflect on its most fundamental suppositions, on life, leadership, and community. A realm as stringent as it might not adapt to chains or adversity marked with the Conflux. Its knights may fall to death, ambition, and fury, but they and their hosts may stand defiant and seek new realms to conquer in the name of a united Bant. Alara once was whole, but long ago the sundering shattered the plane into 5 shards that drifted just beyond each other's reach. As the shards migrated, they slowly took on new shape, new life, new order. Mana ley lines were severed, denying each shard access to 2 colors of mana, which allowed those remaining to surge unfettered. One such shard lost its connection to green mana. Verdant bloom withered, vitality seeped, organic vigor all but lost. Its forests and beasts disappeared, and the beautiful savagery of nature vanished. Red mana likewise was severed. Aggression and passionate emotion cooled. Sparks of ingenuity died. Spontaneity greatly diminished. The hot fires of chaos were tempered by careful consideration. Here, intelligence reigns. Here, control over all things instills purpose within the beings that dwell. Devoid of the natural, unpredictable vitality of life, a cold, calculated, and precise facsimile of metal has subsumed it. This world is sharp and austere, as close to perfection as can be attained by mortal hands, where knowledge is the greatest weapon, wielded by the sharpest minds. Here, mages telepathically assert dominance, artificers craft ingenious filigree constructs, and inscrutable sphinxes watch over a land as ponderous as themselves. This is the Shard of Esper. Esper is a world richly endowed with blue mana, and is thus shaped by its strong ideals. Blue represents knowledge, the will, prognostication, and mental fortitude. Its adherents crave information and value intellect above all else. Esper embraces such aspects fully. Its denizens are dispassionate. Ruled by logic, they seek to dominate others and their environments through powerful shows of cognitive acumen. Esperites are distant and aloof. Meticulous research and inexorable minds hungry for knowledge have crafted the most capable mages of Alara and produced unparalleled artifice. Blue's quest for control is supplemented by vibrant white mana ley lines. Unity, suppression of divergent thought, zealous persecution of nonconformists are all spawned from the marriage of these colors. But so too does white mana offer the pursuit of the pristine, obsession with exact and unstained lives worthy of perfection. This brilliant metallic light is counterbalanced by the presence of black mana. Selfishness, ambition, greed all feed Esper's quest towards ultimate power through domination. Ruthless and insightful, black mana ensures that knowledge gained in research is not purely academic, but provides pragmatic and practical use for those daring enough to unleash its full potential. When combined, these colors create an intelligently designed world, immaculate, ruled by sublime foresight and crushed by fear. Esper is a cold world of sharp metallic edges, its beauty crafted, its grandeur containing dark and dangerous undertones. But as with Alara's other shards, Esper is just as easily defined by what it lacks. Individuality is abhorred, displays of passion shunned, the chaotic forces of red mana snuffed out in favor of strict control. Likewise, life has been stifled. Verdant growth and harmony present in green mana have depleted, leading to a stagnant husk replete with the artificial. Thus is born a shard of intention, a pristine progress and foresight, lacking the invigorating surge of fortuity and weighed greatly by suppression and ambition. The geography is as harsh and well-planned as the beings that dwell within. Vast oceans with depths unknown hide large leviathans and serpents infused with metal. Cities of architectural genius sit high atop rocky islands, infrequently breaking above the foaming surf. These glistening monuments of civilization evoke a sense of purity and conviction, but beneath, many hide sewer systems and festering ghettos where all manner of vice is employed and where nightmarish abominations lurk, seen in cards like Salvage Slasher and Sludge Strider, whose flavortext reads, "Underneath the cities of Esper are cycles of life unseen by those who feed them." Above the salty waves and spires of Esper, massive storms rage and powerful winds surge. As a show of control, Esper Stormcallers have long since dominated these chaotic vestiges of nature, seen in the illustration of Countersquall, whose flavortext tells us, "Each of the 23 winds of Esper is named and chronicled, and every possible interaction with the flow of magic is exhaustively detailed." Beyond the sea lies an equally vast desert of rolling sand dunes whipped by relentless gales. Upon closer scrutiny, the sands of the aptly named glass dunes are actually fragments of crystal, shards of discarded metal and glass reduced to dust. This inhospitable environment is on display in the illustration of Glass Dust Hulk. Central to Esper is the omnipresent and magically infused metallic alloy known as Etherium. Etherium can be found in nearly all things on the shard. Its life-extending and invigorating aura is used to combat the frailties and limitations of natural life. Artificers and filigree crafters shape new constructs out of the metal, which we can see in cards like Etherium Sculptor and Master Transmuter. The faith in Etherium is highlighted in the flavortext of Master of Etherium, which states, "Only a mind unfettered with the concerns of the flesh can see the world as it truly is." The metal is a commodity, a show of status, and a means to craft the most advanced artifacts and structures known to Alara. Its presence and significance is highlighted in the printing of colored artifact cards. This is meant to represent that metal and steel suffuse all things on Esper, even those deemed natural, and is present through many cards within the block. For Esper mages, Etherium is a symbol of enlightenment within the mind and perfection of the body. Flesh to them is weak, finite. All on Esper gather this rarefied substance, transmuting it to replace body parts as they progress ever more closely to mechanical purity. So obsessed with this process are those on Esper that a faction known as the Aethersworn have assumed responsibility of supplanting all natural life with Etherium, a conversion they dubbed the Noble Work. We hear the chilling beliefs of these zealots in the flavortext of Aethersworn Canonist. The noble work of our order is to infuse all life on Esper with Etherium. Our goal will be reached more rapidly if new life is suppressed. And in Identity Crisis, we hear, "To join our ranks, one must be pure. To be pure, one must be blessed by Etherium. To be blessed, one must forget oneself." The noble work is an arduous task due largely to the constraining fact that new Etherium hasn't been wrought in centuries. Knowledge of the mystical rites involved in crafting Ethereum was possessed only by the Sphinx Crucius, who eventually fell from grace, was persecuted, and disappeared into myth. But fables tell of a red crystal humming with vibrant energy that was once used to shape the vital alloy, and many Esperites dedicated their lives scouring the shard for any trace of the crystal. Esper is a meticulous and structured magocracy dominated by the hegemony of its ruling sphinxes. It's no wonder on a shard where knowledge represents ultimate power and feats of mental acumen lauded over physical deeds that those who wield the forces of magic also wield socio-political clout. Esper mages are the ruling elite in a strictly censored state. They display their prestige ostentatiously through their legions of driveling servants and homunculi, which we see in cards like Puppet Conjurer, while the flavortext of Court Homunculus grants insight into the social landscape. Mages of Esper measure their wealth and status by the number of servants in their retinues. Wealth and power are also measured by Ethereum. Mages who have largely transformed themselves with filigree and replaced flesh with metal command the greatest respect and resentment. In battle, Esper mages employ powerful countermagic to disrupt spells, dominate the wills of their foes, and utilize telepathic commands to control gargoyle constructs or knights in their employ. Ideas are a potent force on Esper. Chaotic danger lurks within. They're systematically suppressed, censored, and scrutinized by architects of will. Rogue thoughts are policed, propaganda distributed on ether-wrought pages to control the masses and shape their reality. Ideas are proscribed by Esper sphinxes, for they represent the pinnacle of knowledge and arcane wisdom. Aloof and obscure, the sphinxes prognosticate from regnal fortresses and deliver cryptic decrees based on their divinations. The strongest and wisest is Sharum, the hegemon, who directs all aspects of intellectual pursuit to ensure a united Esper. The enigmatic Sphinx is assisted in disseminating their dogma by mentalists and by the Ethersworn, who enforce dictates with lethal conviction, as seen in the Ethersworn Adjudicator. A faction of zealots and Ethereum-crazed artificers, known as the Seekers of Karmat, center their operations within the impregnable, mysterious floating fortress of the Sanctum Arcanum. Here, they ponder Ethereum's mysteries and sojourn through the landscape and library alike to uncover Karmat, the mythical crystalline substance purported to bear significance in the crafting of Ethereum. With no way to produce the foundational metal, and with current supplies exhausted, the Seekers carry their task with desperate sincerity. Hope of returning Ethereum to Esper weighs on every thought. We see them in cards like Filigree Sages and the Vidalcan Outlander. Despite its oppression of divergent thought, there are those on Esper who oppose the Sphinx hegemony, thwart their architects of will, and ridicule the Seekers. Such minds are found in Palandius, and in the flavortext of Arcane Sanctum, we hear their contempt for the social order. We must rely on our own knowledge, not on the dogma of the Seekers or the mutterings of the Sphinxes. Other rogues find haven within the glistening walls of Vectis, a sprawling city built around pristine ether-wrought towers. Salvagers and thieves perform all manner of contrarian acts in the shadowed alleyways of Vectis, as we hear in the flavortext of Vectis Gloves. Thieves love technological innovations almost as much as artificers do, and the criminal syndicates that rule the city's underworld seen in Vectis Silencers. Below the metropolis is a labyrinth of waterways, waste dumps, and scrapyard tenements known as Tide Hollow. A locale suited for black market salvage, assassination, and subterfuge, Tide Hollow is haven for Vectis' seedy activity. A sentiment echoed in the flavortext of Scepter of Fugue. One goes to Tide Hollow either to forget or to be forgotten. Either way, the scholars will oblige. Tide Hollow is a symbol of defiance against strict order forced upon Vectis by Sharum. As such, agents and artifacts of the hegemony frequently raid hideouts, related to us in the Arden flavortext of Mindlock Orb, which reads, Rogue mechanists once rummaged through the wastes of the Tide Hollow, constructing unauthorized golems to threaten the hegemony of the Sphinxes. The orbs put a stop to that. Though Esper is molded by rigid strictures, it's a shard of much diversity, typified by the races that dwell within. Briefly mentioned have been the winged, mystical sphinxes who dominate minds and issue proclamations of the hegemony, enforced by loyal Esperites. Sphinxes are dubious, unfathomable to the mortal minds by whom they are beseeched to share the tiniest hint of arcane wisdom. Knowledge is power to the Sphinx. These creatures speak in infuriating riddles, censor thought, and are harshly critical of those they deem unintelligent, as is the case with Magister Sphinx, whose flavortext reads, "These benighted worlds are thick with ignorance. I will educate them. They will listen, or they will die." To secure steadfast devotion, sphinxes have in their employ artificially constructed gargoyles. Their winged silhouettes purposely invoke the dark presence of their masters. We see this on display in darklit and tower gargoyles. A sphinx is spiteful and selfish, with ill-contained ambition. Their chilling machinations are heard in the flavortext of the card Onyx Goblet. The goblet was a gift from the sphinx Scoriel, who hoped humans in Vidalcan would eventually destroy each other to acquire it, leaving all of Esper to her own kind. Several other peoples inhabit Esper. Chief among them are the tall, thin, blue-skinned Vidalcan, many of whom share predilections towards magecraft and artifice. They number among the illustrious Seekers of Karmat and Aethersworn, but can likewise be seen in court as advisors and aides to the ruling sphinxes, as seen in Sphinx's Herald. Some Vidalcan, such as the Esper Stormblade, are effective stormcallers and null mages. They beckon forth powerful gales to crush foes and inspire fear in would-be interlopers. Vidalcan have the highest number of Ethereum-infused members, which allude to the prestige and respect they command. Their filigree ingenuity on display in Ethereum Sculptor and Aethersworn Shieldmate. Many Vidalcan and some humans number among domineering mind mages, which control voluntary subjects known as Telemin through thought projection. As a puppet master pulls on the string of his creation, so too do mind mages command their Telemin, instruments broken of will to carry about heinous deeds. We see their skill in Telemin performance and hear their self-assuredness in Scepter of Dominance, which reads, "Whether or not you will bow to me is not open to debate. The question is, will I ever let you rise?" The other sentient race comprises Esper's human population. With varying degrees of Ethereum enhancements and equally ubiquitous among the highest courts and the putrid sewers, humans fill roles at every societal level. They're most densely populated within the glistening metal city of Vectis and its lower reaches that empty into underground Tide Hollow. Some are employed as assassins or architects of will for their hegemony. Others are zealous fanatics that have devoted their lives to the Aethersworn. And others still have splintered from the Sphinxes to gather retinues of disaffected, downtrodden souls to salvage, spy, silence, or otherwise engage in illegal activity. Scurrying about Esper's sanctums are diminutive, blue-skinned servants called homunculi. Crafted of metal and magically instilled sentience, homunculi carry out their master's commands unquestioningly. We see them in Puppet Conjurer and Court Homunculus. The winds and clouds above Esper are domain to multiplex winged creatures, many of which have been sculpted from Ethereum. Drakes, like the Cloudheath drake, stalk dangerous storms. Birds, such as the cormorants, migrate island to island above the ocean's salty spray. And a most peculiar species of artificial floating jellyfish scour the land, their bodies a rapacious receptacle for scrap metal, seen in Esperzoa. With the conflux of Alara, violent surges of red and green mana roll across Esper, introducing natural chaos that rattles the established serenity and perfect rule of the shard. Control, that all-important ideal, loses its grip on Esper as red mana introduces passionate emotion, creative uncertainty, sparks of ingenuity whipped to a frenzied conflagration overtake Esper as its denizens adopt new thoughts. Their attempt to maintain semblance of control is given with the flavortext of Celestial Purge, which reads, "This new chaos confounds us. We must fling it into our winds, our storms. These we can control." Such endeavors are illustrated in Spellbound Dragon as Esper mages dominate Jun's apex predators. Their failures equally illustrated in Molten Frame. Meanwhile, the vital force of green mana rushes to crush Esper's mechanized abominations, erode its Ethereum, and revitalize its sanitized landscape. We see the speed at which the natural spreads in Filigree Fracture, which shows an Ethereum-coated Sphinx shattering and reads, "The Sphinx tyrannized Bant until a Rock's mage tested the hardiness of her shiny parts." But green mana also offers insight, a hidden truth, deep and opaque, revealed only through close scrutiny of organic growth, order, and introspection. Some intellectuals forfeit the antiquated dogma of the Sphinxes and embrace enlightenment offered by nature. This is highlighted in the cards Vidalcan Heretic and Lore Scale Coatl, which read, "Ethereum clouded my eyes, clogged my ears, desensitized my skin. Now that I can feel, I can begin to learn." And, "The enlightenment I never found in Ethereum, I have found traced in the Coatl scales." The Conflux brings Esper into contact with Jund's Sangrite and Karmat, two naturally occurring resources integral to the creation of Ethereum that Esper has lacked for ages. The Seekers venture forth to dominate Jund's wilds and fill their stores with the minerals. Their purpose realized, Esperites can begin forging of Ethereum to fulfill the great work. This endeavor is initially undertaken by the mage Brea, who embraces red mana to fuel her mastery over the sculpting of Ethereum. She and her disciples inject invigorating hope into a shard that has been hopelessly stagnant. There are some who doggedly hold to tradition and view her cause as heretical, bringing nothing but dangerous disorder. Esper, a shard of cold calculus, of oppressive rule, of rigid strictures and unfeeling metal. It's a world in which every moment has been meticulously planned, every detail pondered, and every aspect controlled. It's home both to the most brilliant capable mages and artificers, demonstrating their mental prowess in Forge and Sanctum, and to the most dogmatic, nearsighted minds who shun all ideas that they themselves don't hold irrevocably true. This has created a land of great wisdom, chained only by its own limited worldview. That small keyhole has been significantly expanded with Alara's merge, as the Conflux establishes a path to new ideas, new innovations, and new Ethereum. Will Esper prove too rigid, beholden to past truths to embrace a changing world? Or will it adapt, remold its filigree metals to assume control over a new order? One thing's certain, Esper will retain its mysticism, its mentality, and its master over artifice. Alara once was whole, but long ago the sundering shattered the plane into 5 shards that drifted just beyond each other's reach. As the shards migrated, they slowly took on new shape, new life, new order. Mana ley lines were severed, denying each shard access to 2 colors of mana, which allowed those remaining to surge unfettered. One such shard severed its anchoring tethers to white mana. Order dissolved, unity and community forgotten, the healing balm of life stifled. The shard was likewise stripped of its green mana ley lines. Vigor lost, reverence for the natural faded, the strong pulse of vitality weakened. Here, all in abundance are death and decay. Here, the landscape has rotted, the natural life cycle has stagnated, the invigorating surge of growth and light has been cast over, choked by sulfurous fumes of toxic waste. Here, ancient necropolis crumble, their extensive crypts lie empty, for those long dead have risen from eternal slumber. Here, skeletons shamble, vampires take to the skies, and demons gather souls corrupt by promises of power. Here, life has been twisted into a gruesome, macabre mockery. This is the Shard of Grixis. Grixis is a shard richly endowed with reserves of black mana, and is thus strongly influenced by this color's ideals. Death reigns supreme over the fetid swamps and still waterways of Grixis, so much so that most denizens lurking are not truly alive, but rather creatures born from undeath. Powerful necromancers raise buried corpses and command skeletal legions with which to wage war on another. Afflicted vampires soar high above the mountains in ashen clouds, tracking what little life remains. A sentiment of this plagued world is given to us in the flavor text of Fleshbag Marauder. Grixis is a world where the only things found in abundance are death and decay. Corpses, whole or in part, are the standard currency among necromancers and demons. Grixis is equally ruled by ambition, as black mana corrupts countless, shapes dark desires, and reveals a cutthroat selfishness that dominates the land. Greed and personal gain are monumental driving forces, rendering the shard incapable of a structured society, as all seek only their own betterment. Black supported in its violence and anarchy by the presence of red mana. Hatred and loathing are fueled by the passions of red, as the undead recklessly slaughter another and zealously hunt the few living that remain on Grixis. Demonic overlords wield fire and death magic to melt foes, which we see illustrated in the card Blightning, while Blood Cultist highlights the significance of sangromancy or blood magic to reinvigorate bodies devoid of life. Red also lends individualism and freedom, which only fuels the existing anarchy that suffuses Grixis. Not bound by law, the only hierarchy that exists is founded on strength, cunning, and self-preservation. Red's hot tempers and raw emotions are cooled by the presence of blue mana. Blue offers insight, calculus, and prognostication to further the ambitions of black mana. Deceit and subterfuge are employed by blue-aligned mages to realize their goals. Illusionists call on stagnant oceans to fuel spells. Necromancers and liches divine portents through skeletal scrying, and flesh is not all upon which the horrors of Grixis feast. The mind is a delicious morsel, as thought is equally devoured. This is beautifully illustrated in the card Nemesis of Reason, which shows an incomprehensible horror and whose flavortext reads, "Words describing it fail, pages relating it shrivel, tales recounting it end." When taken together, these three colors result in a toxic realm devoid of life and largely denuded of natural resources. It's a shard gripped with anger and dark scheming, where death is abundant, civilization greatly lacking, and corruption seeps from landscape into soul. A truth displayed in the art and flavortext of Grixis Panorama, which reads, "There is no height above Grixis that is free from the stench of death," while the text of Wretched Banquet economically summarizes the reality of life on the shard, in which the traitor King Cedrus remarks, "The meek inherit nothing." But Grixis is just as easily defined by what it lacks. Without the influence of white mana, ideas of order, authority, and structure have dissolved into lawless anarchy ruled only through instinctual desires. Such vaulted morals as honor and duty have been supplanted by hubris and duplicity. We hear this in the flavortext of Grixis Charm. So many choices. Shall I choose loathing, hate, or malice today? Life and healing, manifest in white, are nowhere, their influence absent, the acute pains of which are only exacerbated by the loss of green mana. Both colors foster growth, preserve the living, and inject vitality into life's circle to continue its natural cycling. Without green, forests have withered, fields have long since fallowed, and the cradling embrace of verdant essence has depleted. What results is a shard crippled by inertia, where nothing new grows, where what few shreds of life that remain are constantly and often gruesomely recycled without end. We hear this in the flavortext of Agony Warp, which reads, "Life's circle has become inverted in Grixis. The same energy is endlessly recycled and becomes more stagnant with each pass." Grixis is a foul shard, a husk that at its very core stands lifeless. This is cleverly represented in the unearth mechanic present on several cards tied to it. It portrays both the skill of the shard's necromancers to reanimate dead creatures, and also the pained, grotesque form of immortality innate in such abominations as can be found on Grixis, and inherent in the land itself. The landscape of Grixis is filled with haunted moors, dreg heaps of skeletal and rotten remains petrified by lava flows, and misty waters whose murky depths are unknown. It offers little respite and much danger. The dominant landmass of the shard is known as the Dregscape, a putrid amalgamation of boneyards, necromantic dumping grounds, ruins of ancient eroded cities, still bogs, and meandering rivulets of magma. Its foulness seeps into everything and instills those dwelling within with gruesome intimations. The Dregscape is a temporary resting place for Grixis' dead, who are both willing and unwillingly stirred from their slumber to return as reanimated corpses. It's a horrid fate, but keeps the unnatural cycle of death on Grixis churning. We see it illustrated in the shard's planar card, and the abominations found underneath the refuse in cards like Dreg Reaver and Dregscape Zombie, whose flavortext reads, "The undead of Grixis are fueled by their hatred of the living." It's no wonder this landscape attracts all manner of liches and wizards who summon undead to realize their ambition. Several stony skeletons dot the Dregscape, remnants of cities lost after the Sundering that have now become necropolises and havens for the most ambitious on Grixis. The most notable is Sidraxis, fortress of Lich Lord Cedrus the Traitor King. Long ago, Sidraxis was the kingdom of Vithia's beating heart, but the Sundering shattered order and allowed evil purchase. Vithya couldn't stop the relentless march of demons and undead, but they refused to submit. Cedrus, realizing his people couldn't claim victory, betrayed his station and made a pact with demons. For immortality, he opened Syraxis' gates, allowing ruthless slaughter and blood spilling to flood into his city and devastate his people in wanton massacre, earning himself the moniker of Traitor King in the process. This tale is related in the art and text of Crumbling Necropolis. They say the ruins of Syraxis were once a shining capital in Vithya. Now it's a blight, a place to be avoided by the living. Unx is another bastion of undeath, notable for its zombie wizards and the demons who rule it, which we can see in Archdemon of Unx, whose text reads, "The necropolis at Unx was once a living city, its streets untrodden by death." The half-sunken ruin of Cataract lies at the boundary of the Dregscape, where rotten land gives way to an equally festering ocean. Horrors like the Cataract Creeper and Parasite lurk in its shadowed labyrinthine passageways, awaiting an opportunity to devour stray thoughts and unsuspecting prey. The waters surrounding the necropolis are patrolled by benthic behemoths, as is the case in Cataract Leviathan, while the shoreline is home to all manner of rancid beasts, hoping to snatch tasty morsels of still-living flesh. We see this in the card Shore Snapper, whose flavortext reads, "Cathari, the sickly Aven of Grixis, have learned that the corpses by the shoreline are more trap than treat." Beyond the horizon lies an archipelago of refuse where the Cathari roost. Adept scavengers, Cathari flit along toxic clouds to scrape what little flesh remains on rotten bones, then dump them, as the flavortext of Bone Shard states, in the bone heaps. Their emaciated figures are seen in Cathari Screecher and Bomber. On a shard like Grixis, where pestilence reigns and stagnation permeates, life force is a precious, ever-dwindling commodity. Its essence, called Vis, acts as currency between all manner of undead, who use its vitality to invoke arcane incantations and extend their own miserable immortality. We see the capture of Vis in the illustration of Absorb Vis, while the flavortext of Bone Splinters highlights its import. Witches of the Split Eye Coven speak of a future where Grixis will overflow with life energy. For now, they must harvest Vis from the living to fuel their dark magics. Broadly, Grixis can be divided into two groups: the few creatures that possess Vis and still live, called Vitals, and the overwhelming majority of undead that shamble and scheme for its acquisition. The aforementioned Cathari number among Vitals, as do Grixis' ogre populations, who, due to their toxic environs, have grown bizarre mutations as seen in Incurable Ogre and Firefield Ogre. The former flavortext grants insight to their nature. Each mutation causes the Incurables to look vastly different from one another. They are left with only one thing in common: their insatiable lust for the slaughter. The largest contingent of Vitals are the human bands of nomads called Vithians. Their name harkens to the ancient kingdom of Vithya, whose lineage they can trace, but has long since died out, even in memory. Vithians are mobile by necessity. Their holdouts and shelters, called hermitages, are incessantly under threat by roving demons or undead legions, to whom the scent of Vis is an irresistible allure. They must make haste to avoid a ghastly demise. The Vitals fight a losing battle on Grixis. Death can be delayed but never denied. To ensure survival, Vithians are practiced in the arts of illusion and misdirection, their very lives dependent on cunning. We see this in cards like Grixis Illusionist and Battle Mage. The flavortext of Swerve highlights Vithya's desperation. We can't beat the necromancers in number or raw power. We must beat them with ingenuity and timing. While the Vitals eke out a paltry existence in fear of predation, Grixis' undead lock another in battles of will and ambition to extend their personal influence. The most powerful of undead are winged, horned, domineering demons, vile manifestations of black mana. Their desires unbounded, their schemes unfathomable. Demons represent a darkness few can oppose. They use Vis to cast spells that enhance their power. They use lies and deceit to draw in ambitious supplicants with false promise, and they vehemently attack all who challenge their authority. We see their cruel visage on display in Extractor Demon and Defiler of Souls. The flavor text, meanwhile, of Prince of Thralls highlights a demon's ruthlessness. There are none alive that I cannot crush. There are none dead that I do not command. All manner of creatures bend knees before their demonic overlords and seek to curry favor. But a demon's largesse is fickle and inflicting, as the text of Yoke of the Dam reads. The demon's yoke is part leash, part noose. Perhaps the most powerful of demonic entities is a peculiar mix with a dragon. Malfagor is possessed of demonic knowledge and draconic spite. Beneath demons sit the levitating host of vampires, who dart across the skies and descend on unsuspecting prey full of both nourishing vis and delectable blood. They're a rare sight, only referenced in Blood Tyrant and Vein Drinker, but as with most vampires, they grow stronger with each corpse drained. Undead barons, warlords, and necromantic wizards, known as liches, are common across Grixis and command a great deal of power. They carve up the landscape into petty kingdoms, necropolis city-states, and when not promoting their own machinations, often attend to the schemes of demons. Their ability to summon and lead legions of undead is highlighted in the abilities of Lichlord of Unks, while Death Baron's flavor text reads, For the Necromancer Barons, killing and recruitment are one and the same. The most infamous of Lich Lords is the aforementioned traitor king Cedrus, who rules a vast swath of territory from within his undead bastion of Sidraxis. The most abundant undead are the thousands of poor souls that have been magically reanimated time and again as zombies to unthinkingly carry out the whims of their masters. Bones, skeletons, heaps of putrid flesh are all reborn, denied the satisfaction of peaceful oblivion. They're killed, reconstituted, and revived in an endless cycle of undeath. We see their nightmarish appearance illustrated in shambling remains and infectious horror. Zombies have little faculty, no concern for their own preservation, and no will. They're creatures of deplorable instinct, noted in the flavor text of Zombie Outlander. The ripe smell of life drifted into Grixis. The dead caught the scent, and with reckless hunger, followed it back into Jund. With the coming of the Conflux, Alara's shards, so long isolated, merge again in a tempestuous maelstrom that roils the landscape, that redefines reality. Grixis is buffeted by waves of vital growth and vigorous life force as green and white mana surge across the dregscape. The reconnection to these colors of mana breaks Grixis free from the degenerative stagnation of death as life once again offers renewal. Green mana invigorates the land as powerful forces of nature till depleted soils, mitigate blight, and cultivate growth. We see the blooming of a shard largely withered in the art of Trace of Abundance, where both green and white mana work to reclaim a skeletal necropolis. White mana supplements green in establishing a new life cycle to Grixis, but it also brings order and stability to a shard dominated by chaotic ambition through swordpoint diplomacy. Bant scouts and soldiers sojourn into the putrid swamps of the shard, bent on zealous crusade against undeath. They view the abominations of Grixis as anathema to their own existence and fervently strike against demon and lich lord alike, which we see in cards like Bant Sureblade, while the flavor text of Zealous Persecution sheds light on Bant's war with Grixis and reads, Yarick returned from Grixis changed, a haunted look in her eyes. She destroyed them with an unholy glee that made me shudder. But the Conflux is not a unidirectional exchange, and just as Grixis is molded by intake of new mana, so too does it export death, ambition, and toxic pestilence to the other shards. The sweet nectar of Vis runs rampant through Naya, Bant, and Jund, piquing voracious appetites and the desire to feed within all undead on Grixis. They leave the shard by thousands to slaughter, feed, terrorize, corrupt, and slake their thirst, which we see in the Zombie Outlander, while the card Voices from the Void illustrates the painful tumult unleashed when millions of the damned pour forth. With such swirlings of new energies and revitalized life, the Vithians and other survivors once more have hope of escape or victory over undeath, while scheming Lich Lords tap into surges of mana to fuel new devastating spells, as seen in Fleshformer, whose text reads, Necromancers, who discovered the new sources of mana, were quick to dream up new nightmares with them. And in Yidris Maelstrom Wielder, an ogre wizard forced into the chaotic maelstrom who became a conduit of its raw, volatile energies. Grixis, a shard of rot and decay. It's a land ripe with pestilent stagnation, a land dominated by ambition. Its preserves loathing, selfishness, and misery. It's a land crippled by undeath, imprisoned by greed. All across, demons strike infernal contracts, necromancers raise armies of zombies, and untold horrors lurk in fetid marshland. The few living fear constantly for their lives, as they are surrounded by the consequences of death. Will Grixis be reclaimed and renewed with the Conflux? Will the soldiers and angels of Bant save Vithia from demise? Or will the cold grip of undeath remain and even infect lands beyond with vile sickness that is characteristic of Grixis? Thanks so much for watching and listening to the Shard of Grixis Explained, and that wraps up our series exploring the shards of Alara. Now I want to hear from you. Let me know your thoughts on Grixis' undead hordes. Which shard is your favorite, as well as suggestions for future videos in the comments below. And if you're a fan of lore and storytelling, be sure to subscribe to the channel, check out the podcast or the blog, where content is uploaded frequently. Again, a huge shout out to all of my Patreon supporters over on Patreon. Your patronage means the world to me and helps the channel grow and improve. If you're interested in becoming a lore luminary for access to me, a great community, written scripts, and early video drops, check out patreon.com/lorebrarians to learn more. Until next time, go forth and explore the lore.